Tetsuro Shigematsu is no stranger to Canadians. He's hosted television and radio shows. He's a screenplay writer and an actor. Now, Tetsuro has decided to focus all his talents fulfilling a cinematic vision. The result is his feature film debut, Yellow Fellas. You could call it Revenge of the Asian Canadians. It's a comedy where issues of racial identity are taken head-on with some pretty tongue-in-cheek humor. Have a listen.
I pledge allegiance to the Asian people and to the single race for which we stand. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all Asians. I will take pride in my own culture. No member will date non-Asian women.
And that was a clip from Tetsuro Shigematsu's film Yellow Fellas, and it's debuting here in Montreal this week. And that's where Tetsuro joins us now, right here in studio, to tell us about his adventures both in front and behind the lens. Tetsuro, welcome to The Link.
Oh, well, thank you, Mark. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, tell me, where did the idea for Yellow Fellas come from?
Okay, well, this should really be kept secret if I'm supposed to keep any harmony in the family, but it's actually inspired by my brother-in-law. Now, which is a kind of incendiary thing to say, because Howie Hiroshima is a very controversial character. We've all heard of the angry young black man, right? But Howie Hiroshima, the star of Yellowfellas, or the character, the hero, the anti-hero, he's kind of an angry young Asian man, and he's based upon my brother-in-law, who I first met at this Asian Studies conference. And I remember overhearing this conversation he had with some friends, and they were basically saying, okay, but where are we going to get the money for the guns? And I thought, okay, you guys are kidding, right? Because they sounded like Black Panthers, talking about revolution and, attacking the establishment and down with Whitey. And I thought, you're just being facetious, obviously. But they were actually quite serious, like young Black Panthers, but I suppose in this case, they were Yellow Panthers, and that was sort of the genesis for my movie Yellowfellas.
But now this is supposed to be a comedy, and you're talking about guns and violence. So describe how the film unfolds here.
It's kind of a dark, edgy comedy. Howie Hiroshima begins his journey by he's riding on the Montreal Metro, and he has an encounter with two very docile skinheads who are, in fact, skinheads against racial prejudice. But Howie has delusions of paranoia, and so he just doesn't like the vibe he's getting from them. So he picks a fight with them, and of course he gets soundly beaten. And that's all the confirmation he needs for his theory on everything, which is that the white man is out to get him. And then that's the sort of the inciting incident that inspires him to form a small army of like-minded Asian young men. And together they rise up as one, and they attempt to stick it to the man, but with a rather comical result. Sounds, based upon what I'm describing, kind of rather dark and violent, which it can be at times, but it's a laugh-out-loud comedy, that's for sure.
Well, Tetsuro, you obviously are Japanese-Canadian. You were born in London. Your family immigrated here to Canada when you were fairly young.
You've done your homework, Mark.
But you also had a very successful career here in Canada, a broadcaster, amongst other things, on Canada's national network. Did you face any of this racism or violence against yourself?
No. Mark, I have to admit, before I became co-opted into the CBC. I used to refer to it as the Cracker Broadcasting Corporation, but I'm very sorry I ever did that because, in fact, my time...
And cracker being a racist term,
That's right.
Against white men.
Yes, precisely. And I kind of expressed that tongue-in-cheek. But I did find, having moved from television to radio, that radio was, in fact, refreshingly free of racism compared to television for obvious reasons, but I think one of the reasons why I did fairly well.
Now you have to explain what the obvious reasons are.
I originally I think one of the shows that I happened to be on or was attempting to get airtime on, their particular audience tended to be white, middle class, middle-aged maritimers. So I think at the time there's a bit of a disconnect seeing my Asian face and English coming out of my mouth.
Unaccented, generally speaking. Precisely,
yeah. Just talking without an accent. Whereas on radio, I think, let's face it, I sound as white as you, Mark, but so in that regard, I didn't have the disadvantage. I think listeners all over Canada who may not have had a person of color who happens to be their friend, they found it pretty easy to accept me, I think, as their radio friend.
The only distinguishing thing would be your name.
Precisely.
I mean, if you were speaking on the radio and you called yourself Tony Smith, no one would know, right?
Exactly. And I think people like saying Tetsuro Shigematsu. Oh, have you heard Tetsuro Shigematsu on the Roundup today? It's kind of like you're speaking Japanese without really trying.
What age did you sort of discover that you were different from others in terms of skin color and racial background? And
That's a terrific question. I suppose it was in grade school. And I remember we were all in the playground. And we decided, okay, the TV show we're going to simulate today, okay, we did Star Wars yesterday. Today, let's do the Dukes of Hazzard. Okay, and so we kind of assigned all the parts, and Bo Luke came up, and he was the brunette of the two. There's the blonde one. He was taken by Jason Dirks, and I kept on waiting for someone to say, well, obviously, Tetsuro, you'll be Bo, because you have dark hair. And I kept on waiting, and I was just like pointing at myself, clearing my throat, and eventually I was no one. And it took me a long time to figure out that the reason why I wouldn't be cast for that particular role was because I was in fact Asian. So that was probably one of the first wake-up calls I had that, oh, okay, I'll be perceived as different. And while I didn't have, complete enlightenment that day, that was kind of the beginning of a long road towards self-awareness as a person of color.
Now, in the film Yellowfellas, this is a comedy, and racism generally provokes some strong feelings. Why choose comedy as a tool to talk about racism?
Well, I suppose I think of Mark Twain's quote, which I'll hereby garble to some degree. But he said something to the effect that if you can make them laugh, then you can really convince them. I think racism is such a controversial topic that if you approach it seriously, then it's hard not to come off as strident and therefore turn off people. But if you really want to affect people's thinking, I think if you have any particular message or social commentary, it's best to kind of cloak it within the Trojan horse of entertainment. If you leave them laughing and then they go home thinking, hey, there was some interesting things there, I think that's the best way to communicate your point of view.
Is this a film that has an underlying message for Asian Canadians as well as Caucasian Canadians, in the sense that you have kind of a reverse racism here, if I understand it correctly? You've got this central character who is like rabidly anti-white, for example.
I suppose one message that it could convey is that it's okay for Asian Canadians to be angry, to be vitriolic, and to express any kind of pent-up hostility they may or may not have, because for so long, Asian Canadians, we've been dubbed the model minority. We're the minority that behaves well, that assimilated properly, we learned English, and we dress the same, and that's always given to us as a compliment. But in a way, it's kind of a backhanded compliment from dominant society, because in a way, it's saying, we like you, Asians, because you're just like us white people. So I'm saying in a way that it's okay to be different, and also to maybe to a certain degree buck up against that.
Mm. Is the target shifting as Canada's demographic shifts? I mean, white society is less and less the dominant society in Canada as more and more ethnic communities come to this country and become Canadians.
I think that's a really exciting development within Canadian society, and I think we're in a very interesting time. And I use interesting carefully.
Not as the Chinese proverb, right? But
yeah,
you live
precisely.
in interesting times.
Yeah, and we do live in interesting times, and as a result, we're seeing all sorts of growing pains. And Yellowfellas is sort of a reflection of some of those pains and tensions, which can be at times tragic and at times quite comedic, depending on which way you choose to look at it.
So where can people see Yellowfellas? Is there a website that people can go to? And then when is it going to be in films or in the theaters, I should say? Well,
Yellowfellas is currently playing in Montreal at the Fantasia Film Festival. And it's really easy to remember because it's on 7/7/7, that's July 7th, a Saturday, at 5 p.m. at the D.B. Clark Theatre at Concordia's Hall Building. And with any luck, it'll be traveling across Canada to Vancouver International or
other film festivals.
That's right. So right now we're doing the festival circuit. But if they want to find out more information about the film or where it's playing, just go to yellowfellas.com.
Tetsuro, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mark.
Tetsuro Shigematsu is a writer, ex-CBC host, and filmmaker. His comedy Yellowfellas, once again, makes its Canadian debut here in Montreal at the Fantasia Fest on July 7th. And you can find out a little bit more by going to the Fantasia Fest website, which is www.fantasiafest.com.